Most investors follow trends. Very few develop edge. This show focuses on something different: how serious operators build durable wealth in overlooked niches, starting with mobile home parks. We'll break down the strategy, underwriting, discipline, talk about the roadblocks, and the operational execution that'll make your capital aligned with long-term returns. This isn't about chasing deals. It's about thinking like an allocator and executing like an operator. This is the Mobile Home Park Exchange. So today on the Mobile Home Park Exchange podcast, we're going to talk about what it takes to get you through the J curve. What's the J curve? If you're involved in any turnaround project, that's the point in time where to make the property better, it's actually going to look worse. Maybe not just optically, but financially. And the goal is to get through that curve as quickly as possible, because on the other side of that J curve, that's where the returns really become substantial. Everybody loves talking about a stabilized mobile home park, and everybody thinks about pulling the easy levers. But the reality is, if you want to make a community turn around, you have to get through that J curve. And today, we're going to talk with my partner, Eric Busuttil, and we're going to talk specifically, we're going to go inside American Way, which is a community that we acquired in Hubert, North Carolina. And the backstory on that is amazing. And for you guys who are watching or listening to this, you could actually see what we did on our YouTube channel, Trailer Park Turnaround, and the video from neglected to next level. And so this is really the story behind the story. Welcome, Eric. Welcome back to the podcast. How you doing today? Good morning. And Eric, I want to take you back a little bit, because it's easy to look at things now and we always get caught up in the moment. But American Way, we acquired in August of 2023, but we first went down in there looking at that in February of that year. Do you remember like the first time you went there?
I do, Frank. And just like many properties that we've purchased, it needed a lot of work. I mean, the homes have been neglected. The roads were in disrepair. There was poor lighting in the community. Nobody was keeping up with the community. And I remember, specifically, there was a sign out front that was dangling by a string, literally, right? You remember that?
I do.
It was literally dangling by a string. And I remember asking, the prior owner, what happened with that sign, right? And not only was it dangling by a string, but it was sitting there for years.
Years,
right? I think it was a storm that came through, and it just sat, and he never got to it. And so you go into these properties and you just look at these properties, and I mean, for us, we could see where we want to go with it. But I guess for a lot of people, when you look at that park, I mean, that was a big undertaking on our part.
So the interesting thing about the sign, what stuck out, because I do specifically remember you asking him about the sign, and it wasn't just a traditional like post sign. It was on a metal post, and the sign was dangling over. It was like it was a sign that was on a metal post, and it was dangling over. And the storm that he referenced happened in 2008.
Wow.
Right. And I remember the follow-up question. I asked him, well, what happened? He's like, well, I called somebody and they didn't come. And then he said something that just resonated because this was the original owner's grandson at this point, right? So it went to the grandfather who built it, the father who ended up inheriting it, and now the grandson is running it. And he was living there on site, and he just said, "I got tired," and it's now, 15 years later, and the sign still had not been fixed, and you could just tell. And interestingly enough, to go back a little further, and you've said this so many times, right? Where we take a community and then we try to bring it back to its former glory, right? Or what it used to be at that time, and try to kind of reconstruct that name or reinvigorate that name, especially if it had a good name in there. But one of the things that struck us when we went there, this community had such a bad reputation,
Right.
that we said we had to change the name. Like, we had to rebrand this from day one. Like, we just said, we knew going in, reputation, like any bad stigma that a mobile.
Is that the only park we've ever renamed? I'm trying to think. I think there might be.
I
I think we've added like a name. We added estates to a few of the properties, but I think that's the only property that we've renamed.
I think you're correct. I think that we actually looked at that, and I think in some ways you're giving the description a little bit. You're being less descriptive than normal. The roads there were so horrendous that when you pulled into that community, the craters were so big. It was you would have thought one of the asteroids that killed the dinosaurs came there and landed there. It was just it was that horrendous. It was so bad, right? The roads were so bad that the school buses wouldn't pick up kids in the park. The kids had to walk out on the highway, go to the next community, and to get picked up because the school buses weren't going through there. And then after we closed, remember the post office came to us and said, "Hey, by the way, we're not delivering mail to the community anymore." And the mail was just like right past the front entrance because the road was so bad. So that's how bad this condition the community was in.
Right.
So, I mean, we're entering a new market. So at this point, we had been in North Carolina, but we were never in the Jacksonville. So this is in Jacksonville, North Carolina. But we're entering into a new market. It's 84 lots. There was 44 homes on site. I believe we ended up demoing 8 homes.
I mean, by now it's probably been more.
Yeah, but I think the initial plan was 8 homes. I mean, what else? Looking at that, we knew the roads had to be done, right? That was the obvious. But what else? Looking at that, was part of the plan, like that we knew that we had to do.
So this property's 70 plus acres, right? I mean, the portion of the property that had the homes on it is not on the 70 acres. I mean, we probably have 20 acres or so filled with homes right now, right? But and then there's an adjoining property that's another 70 acres, and that's another park. But all of the sewer lines is gravity fed, right? And all of the diversion of water throughout this 70 acres is gravity fed. But it was built, when the park was built, which was 50s, 60s, I believe this park was built, right? And why these roads were like that is because nobody's been keeping up with these ditches and these these areas that have been built to pull the water out of there by gravity, right? They've just been taken over by grass, by dirt, by trees. And, when it rained, there were just pools of water everywhere around homes, around roads. And I think, I don't think we've ever had to deal with that bad of an issue in regards to water, right? So, looking at that property, I mean, the entire property water would just sit everywhere for days and weeks after a big storm. It just wouldn't go anywhere. There was nowhere for it to go. And that was that's an ongoing, that's something that's ongoing constantly when we bring in new homes, is to make sure that, those lots are prepared properly and that we brought all of the original systems back to life.
Yeah, that's a great point, because to do that, even before you bring in the homes, right, you have to address the underlying issues. So when we talk infrastructure, you talk roads, you talk, all right, I could put in new lines, but you know, when you're buying a quote unquote mobile home park, that park word is very real, right? It's called a park because typically these are out in fields, right? They're set up. And if it's not maintained, what happens? The earth takes back the land, right? So part of how we looked at this was, we need to go in there. We need to create some diversion principles to ensure that the water is running where it needs to run, because the channels were there. There just wasn't access to get there because of debris, because of weeds and bushes that had grown and blocked the free flow of water, which created these other impediments to infilling and creating a better community. So a lot of what we looked at in the planning was, all right, this has to be tackled first before we do anything else, right? And that it's tree removal, that's diverting water, that's creating pathways for that water to go, which was so important. So even before we closed, we knew, okay, this was, you know, demo the homes, number one. Game two, set two is, how do we start diverting some of this water so we could create some clear pathways before we even got to the roads, right? Because doing the roads and not having that water runoff, we were going to have some issues anyway. But I'm going to ask you this question because, I've had this conversation with people, and, when you acquire a community, I think one of the things that people overlook a lot is the how you're running that community, right? Or the operations, which is such a key component. But what do you think was like the number one thing before we acquired that community that we did that really put us on the pathway to success?
We found the right property manager, and we put the right team in place to help us execute. I mean, that was you can't. I mean, we are as hands on as it gets, but we are from a distance, but you know we found someone who was um, we found someone who was at a higher pay grade, who had experience, who's just right person to do what we needed to do there. I think you can't having a great team in place is probably the most important thing. You can't get this done without the right people in place.
And to give, for those of you listening, to give some reference on that. So when you acquire a community like this, the rents were obviously the reason why people stay there. So here you had a park that could fit 84 pads. There was 44 homes there. There was 8 of those homes that had to be demoed. You probably had about 30 of the 36 residents there that were paying, but they're not paying market rent. I mean, they were paying anywhere between 100, and people are staying in substandard conditions because the rent was well below what it should have been. So I think our monthly gross income that we were acquiring, right, that we knew at acquisition was going to be around like $8,700 a month. But to get effective management, I mean, once you put a manage, and they're self-managing it, that money is an income, like it's an income stream. It's not a business, right? It's a lifestyle for the owner. But to put in professional management, there's no way that we know going in there that it's not profitable. Like, we are going to, that income coming in is going to be eaten up by, the operations, right? So it's going to be a loss, but you need that in order to get, if you have a vision in place to where you want to move that community. Like, it doesn't happen without people on the ground, and that just costs money.
Yeah, I mean, you have to plan for that, right? You have to take that into consideration, when you're putting your business plan together, right? You have to, that becomes you know, um, a big part of the investment into the community. But yeah, I mean, you're running at a negative for the first year, 2 years sometimes, until you cross that road.
So I think that's a That's a great point, and I think that sometimes that gets overlooked. But I think, well, it's part of the reason why we how our capital stack when we go into a community like that is probably different than most, where we'll go into a community that we know there's going to be a steep turnaround, and rather put in conventional debt day one, we'll go in with cash day one. So this way we're owning the property outright, which I know a lot when you'll talk to a lot of other, sponsors or operators, well, they're worried about the initial return of the cash flow, right? And trying to get a higher, look like their yield is better day one. But for us, we understand that this is going to be a process, and we're going to underwrite a loss. And rather than creating some artificial timeline, like some clock, because we've only put interest reserves for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, realizing that things happen in development or repositioning an asset, we come in there with, let's buy the property outright. We'll fund upfront a bit of the capex and put a operating reserve in place, right? Which we'll look at from our planning, and then we'll get a line of credit in place that'll help us fund some of that work that's being done. I think the first phase that we looked at of target improvements was going to be roughly about $800,000 to get us to that next level, right? Like that was where we looked at our capex plan. But I think that's a very important part, and I think sometimes people lose sight of that, right? Because I mean, because you handle that on the development side, anything could happen to slow you down.
Right.
But this project, I think that not even the timelines there we kept were pretty tight. Like what do you attribute that to? Like, we were able to execute a lot of that game plan, even though there were some curveballs that came up. We were able to execute that inside our timelines. Like, what do you attribute that to?
Well, I think I attribute that to us really hitting the ground running, and for the residents that were there, right? They were, not taking care of their homes, right? And why weren't they taking care of their homes? Because the community itself wasn't being taken care of, right? And it just became very common, right? And ordinary for somebody to, you know, somebody's not going to worry about cleaning up the front of their house if their neighbor's not worried about cleaning up their neighbors. But when we hit the ground there, I mean, we did a cleanup immediately. I mean, we immediately went in there. We took down a ton of trees that were overgrown and hanging over people's homes. One of the first projects we did were the roads, right? I mean, the roads got done within the first, I think 120 days, right? First batch, first portion of the park with the roads, and that visual, right? When people are living in that community, it's a shock to them because they've probably been there forever and haven't seen anything done in a very long time. And that's the start of the culture change. Is optically the residents see the change, and immediately when you do that, you typically see who wants to make their homes better and make their community better. And you start to see people, cleaning up their own lots in their own homes and, taking care of things on their own. Changing the culture is, very important, right? So I attributed to that to us really, like we do in many properties, just hit the ground running with a plan and, just execute.
Yeah, the front of the park is so important, and I think you can't underestimate the importance, even from a marketing standpoint, from a culture standpoint inside the community, from a marketing standpoint for wanting to bring new people to that community, how that first visual impression makes a difference. And it wasn't just freshening up, it was new signage with new branding, right? It
Right.
was the roads we created, knowing that the challenge was a school bus. Was the school bus? We created actually a school bus lane in there, and we moved the mailboxes to the front with a cluster box system underneath the gazebo, like a covered shed. So we addressed some of the needs that the local community had said was a problem, and we put it in the front, put it visual, and showed, look, this is what we're going to do. We created a clean, easy pathway for people to come in to that park, and just changed everything. Right, the look of the park is completely different. Some uplighting by the signs and some greenage foliage, completely different than from where you purchased it. So even as that's happening, you are seeing the residents who want to be part of that transition and the ones that just will not. And I think a lot of that has to happen. I know it's easy to say, like, the rush to infill. Let me bring in homes, right, day one. But sometimes in a community, that's not the answer, even though you have to infill to make it work. Because if you don't have all these other things done first, you're going to bring in homes and you're going to just attract more of people who are willing to live in those standards, right? You're going to attract more people who are willing to live with bad roads, bad culture, bad
Listen,
community.
somebody doesn't want to buy a brand new home sitting next to, a 1970s home that no one is taking care of. They just don't, right?
Correct.
Yes, the participation of the residents is extremely important. And yes, you want to infill, but you have to take a look at everything as a whole. And, again, the entranceway, the roads, it all makes a difference.
So now walk us through, because this was interesting. Here we have a county that is one of the fastest growing counties in North Carolina. So we knew that when we came in here, we did, we filtered out where we wanted to be. We liked the market. We liked the economics in the market, the drivers, the growth path in there. And we knew that it was an affordable housing need, right? So we know all of those elements are there. We bring in our first batch of homes, but we had issues, right? You remember those issues that we had with the county at that point?
No, refresh my memory.
This is what I love, right? So we brought in the homes. We had gone through the process prior to, in our due diligence. We knew that we were approved special use permit, 84 lots. We knew that we could bring in homes. We knew that everything was fine. And all of a sudden we brought in our first batch of homes and we couldn't get them approved.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
two things happened subsequently, right, after we closed on it. Number one, and this is stuff that we're seeing happen in a lot of places, right? The initial group of people that we work with, which was kind of like the old guard, retired, right? And you had a new director, new people come in, younger, and there is a push to modernize their records. So here they had a property that's 75 acres. We're on 10 acres of it. We're approved for 84 lots. They had no idea where any of those 84 lots were, right? So we're going in there and our contractors saying, hey, I can't get the approval. And we're not getting clarity, right, in terms of what the issue is. So we had the engineer go there and we're finally like, let's settle this, right? Because there's some, I don't want to play I don't want to play the telephone game. I don't want to play this person said that, or I'm like, let's just get a meeting. Let's meet with them. Let's share with them what our plan is, right? And let's see what their issues are. And then what was their issue, right?
Frank, it wasn't. It was a combination of things, right? It was a combination of
now. See, it went from not remembering to remembering everything. I love it.
I remember it was a combination of things. I mean, and I remember when we went down to the city. I mean, it was a huge building, brand new. Everything was gorgeous, and it was. I mean, it was tremendous. Well, but it was maybe 20% full
because they're planning,
gearing up for, they were gearing up for, a huge influx of new development and stuff like we're doing down there. and they couldn't keep up with it. Right? There
Correct.
was applications coming in. There was a change in staff. There just wasn't enough people, period, to handle the influx of work. So they were staffing up. And yeah, it took some time. It took some time on the first batch. But once we got past that, and they and again, like you said, there wasn't a I don't think there was an influx of new homes coming in mobile home parks there when we first started. Right?
Correct.
Like there was definitely a lot of new applications for new construction, but bringing in new mobile homes wasn't really that big of a thing at that time. So and then again, the people that were familiar with it retired, and then you had these new people there that just needed to figure it out. But once they figured it out, I mean, it's been going super smooth since then.
In one of the things, and this was and this is why having us going down there together and some of the things that we've been able to do, it wasn't just bringing in the new homes, right? And they wanted to know where the lots were going to be set up, which is key. But one of the things that we looked at, even though we were approved for 84 lots, some of those lots that were approved, and you find, I mean, the homes today are just different sizes than the homes 50 years ago. So there were lots in the front that the way they were set up, or you'd be angled in, you'd get it would be stunted growth in terms of where you would, or the homes would be stacked on top of each other, where maybe we could fit a home in, but do you really want to fit a home in? Right. And if you fit that home in, who's really going to want to do that? So if you're looking at the resident experience, or you want to create a community or look at the community, is what's this community going to look like for the next 50 years? Like, what improvements should we make for the next 50 years? What's the consumer going to look like? What's our resident going to want? Are they going to want a little bit more space on their lot? Right? Does that mean we condense some of those lots? So 2 lots became 1, right? And now instead of having 2 lots in that section, maybe we have 1 lot that's almost looks like a lot and a half. And I know we had some we'll call it spirited debates over how to line this up, right? To not only create maximum, for return for our stakeholders, but maximum benefit for our residents as well.
Right. And Frank, remember, right? So not every county will allow you to do that. Meaning, if you have 84 lots, not every county is so willing to say, hey, if you don't put a home here, you can put a home there.
Correct.
Right. This particular county, I guess once they seen what we were doing and they realized how we were improving the community, they've been above average in being flexible, where if, hey, we're not gonna put this lot here anymore, we're gonna put this lot over there. They've been willing, but not every county has been willing to do that.
Correct. And they didn't have that information in the begin with. They just knew it was here, it was on the site, but they didn't have it.
Right.
So when we were creating that plan, we were able to kind of reconfigure where we thought it would work best as well. Right. So during this process, and we talked about how we laid out the capital. So now we're going a little bit back and forth. So during this process where we acquired the park for 1.2, we funded it with another $350,000 for operating reserves in the first phase of the capital improvement. We ended up getting a line of credit probably about 6 months in, right? So when we acquired the park, and here's some of the asymmetrical returns that you can get on acquiring a park, right? That where you could find some embedded equity. We obviously acquired the park based on the park, right? So we paid 1.2 for it. But as you said, right, or you mentioned, that community came with 75 acres. And the park was only on 10 acres of it. So we almost got those 65 acres as a throw-in. So when we went to get our line of credit, even though the financials haven't improved that much at that point, and we were making some improvements, we got at a value of like $2.2 million. So there's all this embedded equity in there. And we use that to fund our growth through stabilizing the first set of that 84 lots, which really isn't 84 lots. I think it's going to end up being 71 from what we've condensed, and we did
Well, on the 10 acres that we have.
on the 10 acres, correct. It's going to be 71 because we're putting an amenity center. We're bringing that in. But then we started bringing in homes, and I remember this being so here we've made these improvements to the park. The front of the park looks completely different, right? We're making these changes, and we're priced incredibly. Like, we're just selling this because we know the first couple of homes that sell are the most important. We have to get traction. And you remember it was crickets for a little while, like that, and we couldn't sell the home. And at that point, we did the work, and you do start to question, like, what's going on? Like, and now I'm trying to deconstruct what's happening and getting involved, like, to the point of calling people myself as to, like, why are you not going into this park? And it was two things. And the number one thing that stood out was they thought the offer was too good to be true. Like, people like didn't believe that we were gonna sell the house at that number. They almost thought the number was so great that they were that it wasn't real.
Yes.
And it wasn't. And I have to credit the neighboring park, right? Because one of the people called the neighboring park to see if we were legit. And when that neighboring park said, no, those guys are actually doing the work, that actually closed our first deal. Right. And the second thing was, and guys, we this is part of, if you own a community, what you got to look at. Our Google reviews were so bad, right? So you don't realize that your consumer is looking at a lot of things to verify you. And at that time, that community was a 2.8 stars. So now you're asking somebody, to your point earlier, hey, you want to buy a home in this park, and then they go to Google and they're saying, American Way, because 2.8 stars, right? Like that didn't help either. Right? So those were two hurdles that we had to overcome, but that was pretty quick. We got through that. It was, it took a little bit longer to get some sea legs, but once we got it, it started moving pretty quickly. So what do you think surprised you the most, like, after we got through that first influx of new homes?
What surprised me the most was, I think the city was extremely welcoming to us, and usually it takes a little bit longer than it did there, and I think that's that has a lot to do with our success. I mean, the electric company, I mean, they've installed millions of dollars of new electrical poles and transformers at their cost. Um, the city has been very helpful in getting things approved and speeding things along. Um, and I thought that surprised me, because even though we ran into little hurdles with them, it really it wasn't that bad at all. And it really was out of our control, right? But usually you don't always see that. You see, we've ran into, you could do a ton of due diligence before you buy a property, and then it's not until you file for your first permit to bring in a home where we've seen some resistance in a lot of cities in doing that. So I mean, that was probably the biggest surprise for
Yeah.
me, looking back at it.
Yeah. And yeah, I think I get that. The city has been helpful. And I think that comes down to creating a good communication where now they know us, they know our manager real well. I mean, one of the challenges that I see that we've had here, and I think you see it elsewhere, your licensed vendors are very tough. Like, your engineer, there's only a few engineers that you can go to that are there, and they're just so overwhelmed with work and sometimes getting the plans back from them. Like you could be delayed on things that have nothing to do with you or the capacity to do the work. It's getting those approvals back. And sometimes it's about submitting the plans in and getting that feedback back. And it's not that people are incentivized to do the work. It's just they're overwhelmed with the development that's happening in this areas, and there's just not enough people who are qualified to do the work, right? So getting that type of those contractors in can add time to your project, which is one of the reasons why we don't initially layer in debt, because we know you could get held up and it's not you, right? It's I'm waiting on an engineer to file plans. That, I can't draw it myself, right? I need their stamp and I need them to have, and you're waiting for the county to sit down and meet with you, and there's only so much time in the day, and sometimes they can't get in there. Um, but once we started picking up sales velocity there, it started. I think one of the things I was surprised at most is the different types of people that started moving into the community, right? So where we initially thought, this might be the profile, we ended up getting a number of people who were relocating from the north that were buying homes cash and they wanted to live 15 minutes from the beach. We had people who were moving back up from Florida who just, maybe they were priced out and they were looking to stay along, that coastline. So we started to get a different dynamic of where we typically thought those residents would come in. And that allowed that infill process to happen pretty aggressively over, you know, we didn't start bringing homes in for the first 9 months because we were doing a lot of that infrastructure work. And then in the next year, I mean, we brought in about the town with 33 homes. I think there's only 9 remaining lots, and I think those homes are on their way, right?
There's a few more homes on the way. But I mean, mostly all the lots in American Way are filled at
Correct.
the moment. And we get maybe 2 or 3 more empty lots of the lots that we had that are sitting there.
So an interesting thing about that was, because we started this conversation talking about the J curve is about getting through that, right? Getting through that period. So here's what happened. I mean, when you buy a community like this or you acquire a community like this, we already know, and we didn't even that some of that existing resident base is going to transition. I mean, the park had a bad reputation, and partially because there was one guy in the back who was selling drugs, and there was some traffic that was coming in there, and it just tied in the fact that his father worked for the grandson, and he was there, and his father also bought drugs from the son who was. So we had to get rid of that element that was already there, right? That's a very, that's a traffic that's causing, so that has to come in. So you're going to eliminate some of those residents. Obviously, as you're doing that infrastructure or doing that work, we're adding costs, right? So we're adding costs for hiring somebody who was a, class A manager, right? And the revenue from the community isn't there to support it. So you're running this at a loss for a period of time as you're making that transition. And we didn't believe that just because we put our name on the title, that we're just going to start raising rents on these people, because you just didn't know who was who and what was what. And you wanted to make sure that we did some improvements first. So getting through that meant that you're running that community at a loss for a while. And that was part of what we understood. And we realized that value was going to come in after we were able to create some of those improvements and maybe drive some rent bumps along the way, but also bring in some people with info. So we were able to get close to the market over time. And that transition takes a period of time. It's not going to happen inside of 6 months. If you're doing a true turnaround of a community, you're not turning around the community inside of 6 months, nor are you going to start pulling that cash flow out of way, because you're looking at it a little bit differently. But when we got to the 24-month period, right, and we were still, we were probably about, at that time, probably about like 48 residents in, we looked at where rates were. We had a line of credit. We used about 830,000 of that on top of what we put in. And we said, all right, this is, rates in 2024 and rates in 2026 are different, better, more favorable. So we were able to refinance that and refinance that line of credit and look at the next stage. So where we were looking at this, and I think we always built this with this in mind, is, hey, we have 65 more acres of developable space. By the time we're done, this isn't going to be an 84 lot community, right? We're looking at this as, 170 lots, plus we got 110 units of storage that'll be there. I mean, this is going to be something better, but it's going to happen in phases. So that refinance brought us to a value of 4.4 million, right? So on our invested capital, that was about a 2.3 times return inside of 24 months, right? And that the income profile completely changed.
Right.
I think, we had taken, rent roll moves from, 8,500 a month to nearly 25,000, right, which is a big change for us. And it kind of spearheaded a lot of that growth.
And Frank, for this type of community, I mean, this type of community was as deep of a value add as you can get. And 18 to 24 month mark is typically how long it should take, right, to do something like we did at that community. I mean, it could be done a little bit faster. Sometimes you can run into some issues. It can take a little bit longer, but I mean, you're really turning around I don't want to say failing business that was there,
but it is a failing business.
But it was a failing business.
It's a failing business.
You can't just pull out all of the money and income coming in from a business without putting it back in. And that was going on for a very long time. And that was a failing business. And, it takes some time to bring it back, regardless of how much money you have, regardless of, it takes some time.
But because there's a lot of different competencies that it has to hit. Because even if you're making the change on the ground, right, the community as a whole, I'm not talking inside your park, right? I'm talking the community as a whole still looks at you for a period of time as being the old owner, right? And that this is still the park where they used to go to buy drugs in the back of it, right? So there has to, conceptually, that period of time has to change. And I found in the 12 years we've been doing this, that alone takes a year for the community at large to realize, oh, there's something different happening there. So just because we made the change today, that doesn't happen right away. And in these types of situations, when you're acquiring a company that needs that J curve, when you're acquiring a company that needs that a property that needs that type of turnaround, the income, right, is a lagging indicator, right? It's not a leading indicator of how well the community is doing. It's a lagging indicator. The leading indicators are the other metrics that you have to look at, right? Is your CapEx project on time? What's been completed inside of the timelines and the milestones that you set in your original planning, right? What's that impact been on the ground with the residents? How fast have you been able to transition them? Are they accepting some of those changes, right? We didn't cover this, but one of the things that we do, right? So where residents have homes that might be, maybe the skirting's off or the deck's off, we also know that they're paying on the market. But here's what we knew. Here's a win-win scenario. We have a program, right? You let us do your skirting and your deck. We'll improve that. And now you'll move a little bit closer to market, right? So they're getting value. They're getting structural integrity of their home. We're getting value because they're getting close to the market. They don't feel as bad because, hey, yeah, my rent went up, but I just got $2,000 worth of skirting.
Right.
So
they need to see you do it first, though. That's the thing.
Yes.
You're not going to get them to buy in until they see you doing it first. Right? Until they see the new homes, till they see you cleaning up the homes that the property owns. The homeowners that have been there forever, that haven't done anything, are not going to do anything until they see you do it first.
No, agreed. You have to set the standard. You just can't go in day one and say, skirt your homes. You don't have any. You have authority as the property owner, but you don't have any authority with them because they don't see who you are or what you've done. When you set that standard first, um, then it's something different. Then they're more willing to accept it. But if you look back at this, right, where do you think that what do you think we would have done differently or could have done differently to speed up the prospect?
Um, Really, the only thing that I feel that we could have done differently to speed up this process, Frank, was to get homes in there quicker. And we would have done that if we didn't run into that obstacle, right? Because we came in and we did the roads over, and we pulled out a lot of the old homes, and we had the trees down, and we were ready for those homes. Um, and I think that held things back, several months. Um, so if we got homes in there quicker, I think we would have been, several months ahead. Um, I think we waited. Another thing I think we should have did immediately, which we waited. We waited a little bit longer than normal to do the front of the park. Right? Or we did the front of the park, but we didn't do everything we wanted to do in the front of the park. We did the pergolas and we did the road over in the front, but we didn't put in the shrubberies or the palm trees. We did that about 6 months, 8 months after we did the first stage in the front of the park. I think we should have did that a little bit quicker.
Well, I'll tell you why that took a little bit longer is because I wanted to put crepe myrtles. You hate crepe myrtles, and you wanted to wait to see what kind of plants that you wanted to put there. So my default answer on that is let's put some crepe myrtles, and you hate them, right? So
And I hate them really because you like them.
so
I don't hate
uh,
crepe myrtles.
so
Frank, but
so
they're messy.
so one thing that I think if I look back and say, all right, we really spent money there and we probably shouldn't have. There was a home in front of the park that I mean, it's in a great location for an office, and we were trying to get in something situated quickly where there could be an office, a home base, and keep what we could have. And it looked like it was kind of okay, but it was an older, like 1978 home. And we ended up spending a lot of money to renovate that office so we could have like a front of park office. A lot of money and a lot of time. Forget even just the money. It's
Frank, you love fixing old homes.
no, well, I've
I mean,
that's
that's the
the
thing. Like,
well, but I thought it was a great spot for the office, and if I could look back,
it was a good spot.
it was if I
It was-
could look back,
and it was ancient, the home,
It-
but it was in good condition.
it was in good condition, but you started doing work in it, and the work just became, well, you did this, then you have to do that, then you have to do this, and you opened up kind of Pandora's box, and we couldn't catch. And you once you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, and we had to get that done, and we needed a place, so we ended up spending, I don't know, 17, $18,000 to get everything decent, so we could have an office with a restroom for people to walk in, so we could sell homes. And ultimately, we couldn't move the home because the home too old to be permitted to move anywhere else in the park. Doesn't fit there. And we brought in a new home, which makes a better office and show place. And so now we demoed the home, right? Right. So now it became a waste. So that's one thing that I would do differently next time. That looking at that. So I'm saying it. So next time I say, hey, let's renovate that old home in front of the park, you say, Frank, remember what we did at American Way. But that's something I think about. I was trying to make something effective. Thought we could get in
Listen,
there.
if you're going to sell new homes, you really want to have a brand new office, right? A brand new home to be in. If one of the homes are going to be your office, right? I mean, if you're going to bring in several hundred homes, which is what we're planning and doing here, and they're all going to be brand new homes, you should be in a brand new office, and it's going to save you time and save you money. It was a good location, and we needed something quick, and it worked for the time
But
being.
it did, but it wasn't as quick as we thought it would be.
No.
Right. And that's what ends up happening.
Well, we moved quicker than we thought we would.
Correct. But it wasn't as quick as we thought it would be, because what ends up happening ultimately, it's capacity, because when you're doing a project like this, you just never have enough people, right? So that becomes the problem. And now if they're working on that, they're not working on something else that could be a revenue generator. So if I look back there, that's something I wouldn't, that's something I would be, something I would be cautious of doing again. Right. So I always try to, but now that we're not finished, this is still a work in progress. So we're talking about this because this is getting through that J curve. It took us 2 years to kind of get to that equity multiple. Now, once you got past, like, there's a certain number, now the velocity of infill is even better. So now we're even further along. Like we just mentioned, there's 9 lots that are remaining that we're bringing in. We're about to finish the amenity center. So the valuation's probably gone up even more, and the property's doing well. It's profitable. We're on the other side of that post 2 years. To your point, takes a little over 2 years to get there. Now it's the next step. So we're not done here. But what do you think is like the big lesson here? Just if you're an investor, you're someone who's interested in the space, you're hearing about this, like, what's the big takeaway that someone should have about this?
The big takeaway is a property, multifamily properties, especially manufactured housing communities. It is, it's operationally intensive. And I don't think it's not a passive income. It's not a passive income type business. You have to be hands-on. If you're going to try to run a property like this from a distance, it is going to be difficult, right? So unless you're buying a real stabilized mobile home park where your returns are a lot lower, I mean, and these type of properties that we talked about today, I mean, this is where the juice is, right? So I think that's a big takeaway that I think you need to understand. So if you're looking for a deal that has meat on the bones, and you're looking to, build equity in a property, it's going to take some time, right? It's going to take some time. If you're going to do it yourself, you got to roll up your sleeves and you got to get down there. And if you don't have the capital to put the right team in place, then you really need to be there all day, every day, trying to do this.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I think if you're looking to build equity, right, and you're looking to have that multiple on equity in the shorter period of time, you've got, to your point, you've got to do the work, but then you also have to understand there's that time frame to get through that J curve. You get to that other side, then all of a sudden things start to really accelerate, but you have to be able to get through that. And to get through that, you're walking, there's going to be points in time in that where you're going to look at it and you're going to question yourself. That's going to happen, especially if you're doing it your first time. But it's, the more you do it, the faster you get through it. You want that steep curve and get back out on the other side. On the other side, it could be really, really great, but you have to be willing to go through that little, you got to make it look ugly to make it look pretty, right? And so that's it. And now we're getting to the other side of it. You did a fantastic job just handling the contractors and getting everybody on a timeline down there. There's nobody who does it better than you do. And I'm really excited about that. Guys, if you're listening to this podcast and you found value in it, or found value in something that we said, do us a favor, and on the streaming platform that you're listening, rate this episode. That's how we get this message out to more people. And just for rating this episode and sending to us, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a copy of our free, of our after site visit report. It's the report that we use, that Eric uses when he goes down on site to make sure the entire team stays on point and keeps moving forward with the business plan. So you could build equity in the properties that you buy. Until next time, this is the Mobile Home Park Exchange podcast. This is Frank Rizzo. Happy investing.